This is Tech Society on Leadership. Today, we're talking with the former CEO of Rio Tinto, Sam Walsh. So, who is Sam Walsh?
I'm a person who wants to contribute, wants to add value, wants to be, I guess, recognised as somebody who's adding to life and making the world a better place. Whether it's sort of through my career in terms of mining and all the good and critical things that mining provides, or whether it's my community involvement and engagement. But all my life it's been like that. As I was growing up, I was very much involved in church and went through a whole range of sort of roles and leadership roles there, and then scouting. I went right through scouting, and I think they taught me, well, you need to take charge, you need to be a leader, but you need to be prepared to add value, to make a difference. That's what Sam Walsh is all about.
So, I've read that you have a reputation for getting things done. What does that mean, get things done?
Yeah, well, I mean, firstly, business is very different to sort of government. Government's embroiled in bureaucracy and what have you, whereas business, you've got to move things forward. You've got to make a difference. You've got to develop a strategy, and you've really got to take the business forward. There are people who want to study things ad infinitum. There are people who think that sort of the journey is far more important than the result or the output. To me, it's the output. Now, don't get me wrong. Researching and planning and analysing is important, but you've got to know when to stop, and the goal is the output. So yes, look, I've had things thrown at me that sort of others would shy away from, and I was always committed to delivering. For example, when I was asked to lead the team restructuring General Motors in this country, GMH, it was incredibly heady. The company was in huge losses, and I say huge losses, and it required completely restructuring the company. Now, others would shy away from it. In fact, I had a couple of team members who thought that the medicine would kill the patient. People hadn't really exposed themselves like you do in an exercise like that. So we had to shut 5 plants and remove 10,000 people from the business and merge the manufacturing with Toyota and hive off the Holden engine company. I mean, it was really a massive, massive restructure. But I saw the need, I saw the task, and yes, I delivered. I delivered to the extent that in my final presentation to the board and the head of the Pacific operations, I said, and this board should resign because they've let this happen. How's that for a 35-year-old sticking his head out? But and actually within a year, they had all gone. Except one guy who was a good guy. He was needed for continuity anyway. But it's things like that when you don't shy away from the task. Even when you've got people around you with sort of wobbly knees and what have you, you've got to stay focused. You've got to stay true to the course as to what you're going to deliver, and you've got to make the brave calls. Yeah. And that was a pretty brave call, asking the board to resign. Yeah, I've always sort of operated as if I was the boss, even when I wasn't. In terms of advising, management, what's going on and what have you. In terms of making decisions that the boss would make.
Yeah.
Likewise, I've operated with the people that report to me. I've always ensured that they had the same knowledge same context that I had. Because it's no good, and I believe very strongly in delegation and, well, having good people, but delegating to good people. And it's no good if they make a decision and I say, well, that's the dopiest thing that anyone could have possibly done. Didn't you know that we're moving out of that product or whatever? They need to know that so that they can make a good and wise decision and not just spin their wheels.
So, you turned Rio Tinto around from losing $3 billion to making a $3.6 billion profit. How did you do it?
We pulled extraordinary costs out of the business. We pulled $6.8 billion, not million, billion dollars out of the business. But, and this is going to sound incredibly trite, but I said to people, you know, I want you to run the business as if you're owners. I want you to spend money as if it's your own. And it sounds incredibly trite, but by gosh, it worked. You know, I had people in very remote areas say, Sam, this project came over my desk and, you know, it was in the plan and budget and what have you, but if it was my money, I wouldn't be spending on it. You know, it won't deliver the value. I know it won't deliver the value. So we stopped it. And, you know, there are a whole raft of things. Now, obviously, you know, we did a lot with automation. We did a lot with standardisation, as I've mentioned. We did a lot in terms of improving our procurement and purchasing and sort of doing things as a group rather than all of the 500 subsidiaries doing their own thing. One of the areas that I was really pleased with was the inventory and the working capital. Rio, when I took over, had $6 billion, again not million, $6 billion of working capital. And you can say, well, you know, what's that? Well, it's a whole raft of things. You know, I mean, it's obviously the items in the stores and the rotables, or the replacement parts for equipment, right through to, you know, production people will always overproduce because that reduces their cost. But you've then got to fund the fact that you know, they've produced all this dirt that you don't actually need right now. So it's reduced their operating cost, but it's increased your capital cost. So there are a whole raft of things like that. The other problem with it was that it was actually overhanging the market in terms of pricing. So it was not only hurting us in terms of our debt, and we had significant debt, but it was also hurting us in terms of the revenue that we're earning. So taking $5 billion out of that was hugely significant. You know, it made a real difference. The other thing, it forces organisations to actually operate more efficiently and more effectively. You know, if you don't have 6 months supply of finished products sitting there, well, guess what? You've got to make sure that your maintenance is top notch, and you know, you're operating and producing and what have you. So it instilled discipline across the company. But it wasn't me that did all this. You know, it was the organisation. You know, a person sitting in the corner office. I used to say this, and you know, my public affairs people said, Sam, you can't say this. I used to say that the CEO doesn't do anything. Well, what I was really meaning is, you know, the CEO doesn't drive a haul truck, doesn't operate a shovel or a ship loader or whatever. A CEO sets strategic direction. A CEO gives people their mission and values and brings on an organisation that's capable of delivering against a plan. It is important to hold people to account, don't get me wrong, but the CEO is not actually doing very much at all. Now, you can see why my public affairs people didn't like me saying that. But it is true, you know. But it comes back to what I was saying earlier about setting the context, giving people the ability to actually track what they're doing and see how see how they're performing. I mean, in a number of areas in the company, we have bonuses across all of the staff. Here in Perth, Rio Tinto Iron Ore has a bonus for everybody. But I don't think I'm against accountants. But the accountants stop people from knowing how the business was actually going. And you're expecting people to work miracles blindfolded. And it was kind of interesting because I caught up with Alan Mullally of Ford. He was the head of Ford, and we were at China Development Forum together, and over a coffee we got talking sort of about the turnaround of Ford and the turnaround of Rio. And we both decided we'd sort of get together and sort of talk about what we're doing. And one of the conclusions we both came to was the accountants in restricting information was actually restricting you from getting the improvement and results that you actually wanted. Accountants were worried about insider trading, but quite frankly, if you're at Rio Tinto, if you're operating a ship loader up the Pilbara coast, you know how the business is tracking far better than anybody else, because you can see the iron ore that are going onto the ships, and you know how many ships you've had the month, and you know what that'll do to your results. 80 to 85% of Rio's earnings. So it was a bit of a nonsense to sort of say, oh yeah, we've got to restrict the information because we don't trust our people. Yeah. So that was also part of the equation. But it was also, we set up a war room so that we could actually track the costs. It's coming back to what I was talking about, forecasting and managing cash and what have you. When you're a CEO, what interests you fascinates everybody else. And if the CEO shows that she or he is incredibly interested in a particular facet of the business, everybody else will be as well. and it works. I mean, it seriously works, because they know that I was very interested in improving our cost position. It was a burning platform, to be quite frank, but everybody contributed, and we provided the feedback, and the people got the bonuses at the end of the year. So it was a good result all round.
In your opinion, has automation actually increased productivity at Rio Tinto?
Yeah, look, I mean, there are a number of drivers for it. A key driver was I actually took my management team to the US to look at sort of new developments in technology before you were born in 1998. Anyway, I took it. I said when we set it up, we don't want to visit a single mining company. But we do want to look at manufacturing, we do want to look at agriculture, we do want to visit universities, we do want to look at IT, we do want to look at marketing companies. We want to understand the big picture. Well, the first day we started at Stanford University, and we had the Director of Engineering, Dean of Engineering, talk to us about farmers who were using robots to farm their fields. And my guys just looked at it and said, well, this is exactly what we do, only we do it with haul trucks. So it sort of broke through the vision or expectations or whatever of my team as to what could possibly be available. Now, of course, there need to be a business case. You don't invest unless it's going to pay for itself and what have you. There was another important element in it that, if I can be very frank, young people today, they don't want to go up to a remote area and work. They might go up for 2 or 3 years. I mean, the turnover is huge in a mining company. And if you install a robot driving a truck, guess what? It doesn't leave you after 2 or 3 years. It keeps doing what it's doing. Yeah, you've got to fuel the truck, but it operates 24 hours a day very consistently. Now, in addition to that, it actually provided environmental benefits as well. It reduced fuel usage, and obviously that improved environmental performance by about 13%, which was considerable. It was far greater than we thought. Anyway, I was trying to explain this to some investors, journalist, I can't remember who, and I said, well, look, it's like my wife. My wife's got a hybrid car, and I do the right thing on the weekend. I take the car and I get it cleaned and I fill the tank and what have you. But I also look at how it's been driven during the week before. My wife never drives on the battery. She always drives on the petrol engine. Now, you could say she's got a heavy foot when she takes off from the lights, or you could say she lives in Perth, and Perth is not really designed for a hybrid. You know, we don't have much stop-start traffic. You're generally driving at 60k, and when you drive at 60k, the petrol engine sort of is engaged. But clearly, in not using the battery, she was increasing her fuel use. Now, she heard me say this one day, and that night she said to me, Sam, I think I'd like a new car. So that story cost me. But it's the same with the haul trucks. We then automated the drills and introduced a level of sophistication that had never been there before. So you do your initial sort of exploration drilling, and you get big samples and you send them off to a lab and you analyse them and what have you. And yeah, we should mine there. It's sort of a relatively high grade area. But when you go in to do the infill drilling, so that you can put the explosives down the hole and blow the thing up, so that you can physically get to the ore, that infill drilling, there was never any real-time analysis of that. Now, as you know, why not? And guess what? As part of the automated drilling, we introduced automated real-time feedback on what's actually happening down that hole. It sort of helps you in terms of sort of how you're mining and what's waste and what's product. But it also helps you in terms of the explosives you're going to use so that you can optimise it. If you're mining iron ore, you have two products. Well, you have a number of different mines, but you have two major products. One is fines, which is like sand, and the other is it's like rocks. It's like small rocks. It's called lump. If you use too much explosives, you blow up all of the rock and you don't produce lump. Lump has a premium. You get paid more for lump than you do for fines. So getting that balance right was incredibly important. Rail, we automated heavy haul rail, first in the world. Now, you can say, well, that's not rocket science. Shinkansens have been operating for 50 years. Why is this so special? Well, it was special because the trains are 2 kilometres long, and you're going through the Pilbara, and you could have the front of the train going down a hill, the back of the train going up a hill. And if you just imagine the G-forces on that if you get it wrong. So a huge amount of very intelligent work needed to be done to actually physically implement that. Yeah, apart from the fact that the train weighs sort of 25,000 tonnes. It's a heavy beast. So there were over 20 road crossings. So for the first time, we put in sort of bells and boom gates and what have you. We put cameras around each of these road crossings to make it safer. And the whole thing was controlled from a remote operations centre near Perth Airport. So that if the alarms went off, that a car had sort of stopped on the rail or whatever, you could physically stop the train.
So I heard it was actually you, and this is a rumour, but I've heard it, that it was you who told Ken Beasley that needs to be more active on social media.
Yeah, that's interesting you picked that up, but yes. Yes, I had a lunch with him, and we were talking about a whole raft of things. It's a global world out there undergoing a lot of change and what have you. And at the end of it, I said, look, with COVID, Kim, you're starting to become invisible. And he said, what do you mean? I'm out here doing this, I'm out here doing that, and whatever. And I said, well, yeah, but you're not on Instagram or Facebook, and the people out in the suburbs don't know what you're doing. And he said, well, no, I'm on the web. And I said, what do you mean you're on the web? And he says, oh, well, I'm on the RSL sort of website. And I said, well, sorry, that's not one that I go to every day. Anyway, yeah. And the fact of the matter was the Governor-General is already on Instagram daily. And I just thought it was an important message for His Excellency because he does do wonderful things. You know, he is out in the community, he is out in the regions. You know, he's opened up Government House to, you know, a whole raft of good and value-adding community sort of networking events and what have you. And that's important that you know, we all hear about that so that we know physically what he's doing.
I still thought that was a fun story.
Well, he's still talking to me. I'll see him tomorrow. He's patron of the Royal Flying Doctor Service, and he's coming down to have a look. And I'm sure there'll be a photo on Instagram to record it. But
we love the Royal Flying Doctor Service. We actually interviewed Rebecca.
Yes, yeah, I was with her this morning. She's fantastic.
Yeah.
She's helping reinvent RFDS. You know, if you think about it, you know,
And the same innovation.
yes, absolutely. Well, if you look at the 2 helicopters that are going to arrive mid next month,
Very cool.
John Flynn didn't sort of actually plan that there would be helicopters, and there's no other sector. RFDS is in every state and territory. There's no other RFDS that is running and operating helicopters. There will be. They'll be quick followers. But it's physically important that you're able to do things like that.
And that innovation at Royal Flying Doctor Service, a lot of that is because of the mining industry, isn't it? We have that pressure here because the Royal Flying Doctor Service is obviously, I mean, you know, for the people out there, the flying flat workers, having that available is
Having that's available, and I can remember when Rio Tinto sponsored the first jet with the RFDS. And I remember this. I was at an event, and this lady sort of said to me, "I think it's terrible what you've done." And I said, "Hang on, what do you mean?" Well, you've sponsored this jet so that they can pick up your injured workers, and you know you get priority. I said, no. I hope to God we never use it.
Yeah.
I hope we never ever use it. This is for the community. And she said, well, why would you do that? And I said, well, it's the right thing to do. You know, it's people living in country and regional and very remote Western Australia where time is of the essence. A jet will halve the time it takes to get a critically injured or critically sick person to hospital. And, you know, that is what John Flynn sort of dreamt about when he created the RFDS 93 years ago. And the helicopter will do the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, you'll be able to land where the person is, and then you'll be able to land on the top of Fiona Stanley or Royal Perth or whatever, cutting down you know, the transit time and speeding up the time to get the assistance that the person needs.
It seems obvious. Now that you're explaining it, it's like,
Yeah, it does, but organisations get sort of trapped in sort of a mindset.
Yeah.
Oh, we've never done that, or you know that. Well, you know, we don't know where we'd start or whatever. So you just hire people. You hire people that are helicopter experts, and
did you find that when you took over in Rio, that you know, you had to introduce a new way of thinking?
Yes, yeah, no, very, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rio had a focus of sort of growth, and it was almost growth at any cost. And you know, quite frankly, the company was living beyond its means at that time. You know, we ran up 23 billion of debt, which for a government you can manage it. For a company, particularly you know where you have higher interest rates than we have now, it kills you, and that was physically killing us. So we had to get the debt down. We had to reduce the cost. We had to reduce the working capital. We had to improve efficiency. A whole raft of things in order to basically turned the business around. So it didn't, the figures that you mentioned before sound extraordinary. It was 65,000 people all working to improve the business and achieve it. And it was critical that we did.
Does that have lessons for CEOs and organisations of different scales? Obviously, Ninja Software doesn't work at levels of billions.
Yeah, no, look, I think it does. It's incredibly important to have good people. It's incredibly important that those good people have the context, they have the story, they understand the strategy, that they understand how they can add value. I used to talk to young graduates when they joined Rio Tinto, and they said, well, what do I need to do to succeed? And I would say, well, adding value is what it's about. You've got a job description or role description or whatever, and it's probably pretty boring, but it doesn't actually define how you as an individual makes a difference, how you add value. And I said, by the way, if you want to get on, you've got to do more than your job description. And you get a reaction, and well, I'm not paid to do more. And I said, no, you're not paid to do more. But A, you'll find it more satisfying. B, nobody gets promoted unless it's a dead certain thing. Yeah. Totally unfair. But a boss who looks for somebody to be promoted is looking for somebody who's already operating at that level, already sort of has got the persona or the characteristics or delivering the value or making the decisions, or analysing things or whatever at the next level. And if you simply just sort of roll your arm over and you're not doing those things, guess what? Somebody else who does, they'll get the promotion.
So what is the secret to your success?
I mean, we talked a bit earlier about how adding value is important to me and getting things done. Those are two critical ingredients. I think luck is part of it. I think, as I mentioned earlier, believing that opportunity knocks but once. I think that's important. I think also, the ability to take a measured risk in terms of what you're doing. Business is all about managing risk. If you don't want risk, then just put your money in the bank and get 0.2% or whatever you're going to get. But that's not going to give you the payback that running a business successfully is going to deliver. So I think me succeeding is a function of a whole raft of things. Taking advantage of your experience. I notice it now, I've retired, but I'm still quite busy. It's amazing that the insights and sort of how you can use your experience and what have you to deliver far better results. And it's important as you move through your career that you actually use that to your advantage, but also to your business's advantage. I was very lucky. GM posted me to the US about a year and a half after I joined the company. They had a scholarship scheme where you could go to GM's university there. It's now called Kettering University in Flint, Michigan. And you would do a work cycle at Buick or Pontiac, Chevrolet or whatever, and then you would do the same sort of time, basically doing an MBA. And I saw a notice go on the board about it, and I applied, and everybody laughed and sort of said, you'll never go. You've only been here a year and a half, and you're too young, and whatever. And guess what? I was chosen to go, and it just had a huge impact because it put me through every aspect of the business. Every 6 weeks, I was actually physically moving. So I worked in engineering. I worked in IT, as I mentioned. I worked in finance. I worked in supply. I worked on the assembly line. I worked in the manufacturing. So, and it just gave me an incredible view of how a business operates, how it actually all fits together and how it all works.
So what is Sam Walsh up to these days?
I am retired. I do have the occasional morning or occasional afternoon where I don't have phone calls or don't have meetings. But it's about doing what I want to do, doing things that I enjoy. Yeah, so arts, charity, church, business. It's fine. But at any time, I can say, well, no, hang on, that's not for me anymore. And that's the difference. That's a big difference. I also like the stimulation of the diversity. You know, I mean, every day there'll be something come out of left field that you know is completely different, where you can make a call, you can add value and whatever. Having run a very, very large company, most of the crises that happen within the organisations I'm involved in, they're not really crises. You know, people get very sort of, you know, uptight and what have you, but you're used to big disasters, so you know, dealing with sort of operating issues here, it's fun.
So a geopolitical question now. What is Australia's real exposure to China? Are we too dependent on them?
Yeah, I mean, clearly it's a risk, and clearly, you know, we're seeing with barley and wheat and wine and gold and a whole range of other things that you know, we've been impacted by this trade war. It's a huge market, it's a huge opportunity, so it made sense that Western Australia looked to help satisfy their requirements. You'd like to think, well, there's other markets. There's India, but you know, India's got sort of large population and will have large demands, but the growth and advancement in India is going to be much, much slower. We've got Indonesia, yes, that's an opportunity. We've got Vietnam, Philippines, and so on. But the world has shifted to the east. I can remember when I was in the UK and they talk about the Far East, and I said, where on earth is this Far East? You know, they were referring to where Australia is and sort of China, Japan and what have you. Yes, we've got issues at the moment with China, but I mean, it'll ultimately settle down. Yeah, it doesn't make physical sense that China is buying their barley from the USA with the freight costs and what have you, and we're supplying our barley to Mexico, which used to be supplied by the USA. How does that work? How is that sort of economic? You know, at the end of the day, it's not sustainable, and you know, we've seen things settle down. So I believe over time, you know, it'll settle down.
So do you think we're moving into an era of stability or instability?
Yeah, it depends. When you asked me that question, if you'd asked me that question a year ago, I would have said instability. I think sort of sense is starting to prevail. You know, we've still got sort of army coups and what have you happening. We've got Palestine and Israel and you know, a range of other things. It's kind of interesting when you look back and we look at what's going on now and we think, oh God, you know, the world is you know, pretty unstable. But you know, when I was growing up, when I was going to university, you know, we were worried about a nuclear war, seriously about a nuclear war. You know, there were friends and what have you said, well, I'm not going to have any children because, you know, I can't bring them into, you know, a world that's going to blow itself up. Now, somehow, we all work through that, and somehow I think, you know, everything will be all right in the end.
Are there any books that have helped you on your journey as a CEO?
Yeah, look, there are a lot of management books around.
There's so many. I collect them.
And yeah, look, I mean, yes, I've read my share of them.
What's the standard?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't necessarily sort of focus on one book because you know, somebody's going to listen to this and say, well, I better read that, better get a copy of it, because I mean, to me, it's the experience that you gain. It's It's the way that you sort of manage your life and what have you. In a way, if you look at me in retirement, that's what it's about. You know, I go to the Business News breakfast, I go to the West Australian breakfast, I speak at events and work with Australian Institute of Management and a whole raft of things, because it's you're continuing to reinvent yourself, you're continuing to get exposure to different things, and remember, most books have got a lag.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
by the time they're actually printed in this modern world, they're actually old hat. You know, they're you know, and a lot of them are just regurgitating the same sort of thing. So my recommendation to people would be get out and about, get and physically network,
Yeah.
go and see operations, go and look for who's the best in the world.
Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us, Sam. It was an absolute pleasure.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Okay.